Welcome, Carolina, John, and all of you people in the future who are watching this in a recorded fashion. We got a request for proposal from a potential client, and it triggered my desire to sort of have this conversation in a recorded way with both of you. Carolina, thanks for bringing the RFP in front of us. The thing is, when I looked at it, I found myself struggling a little bit. At first I thought it was maybe a cynical cover up for a firing project. And then I thought, well, I maybe it's actually really sincere. So let me just tell you, the request was that this person wanted to both move their organization into a more lean and agile way of operating. It's really inclusive and working with staff in an inclusive way, and reduce staffing expenses at the same time. And I thought, first of all, boy, I've actually had other clients want to do that. Second, I thought, this is exactly the kind of thing that people write books about when they're saying, don't do lean like this, don't do lean as a firing project. Under no circumstances should you do it. It's going to ruin things. And then I thought, boy, there are actually some really valuable responses we can give. And I'd like to get on record and share some of these with people out in the world. So just in case you don't know, John is my mentor in sociocracy. He was the first native English speaker to be certified as a sociocratic consultant back in the 90s. He wrote the seminal English language book on sociocracy with his collaborator Sharon Vallines, and has written other books on sociocracy since. Basically, if you're an English speaking person practicing sociocracy or interested in sociocracy, you can probably blame John. With John's help, I brought sociocracy to the UK in 2007, and I've been very involved in the cooperative movement. So I had the pleasure of, again, with John's assistance, launching the world's first sociocratic cooperative management consultancy in 2010. And in a later generation of that company, but still a co-op, Carolina is my colleague and collaborator. So we've got sort of three generations of practitioner here. Now, Carolina is not only an experienced consultant with on her way to certification as a sociocracy expert, but she also brings in embodied practice in music and dance in ways that can create increased collective intelligence. And so we have some really interesting blend of perspectives here in exploring this. So coming back to the client question, John, how can we do this? What's your initial reaction? What happens when you get the question?
Well, it was a very interesting thing because it could have been like, conniving and manipulation in the background. On the other hand, they may or may not have understood that the the basic thing they were asking to tackle is not so much how do we get agile or how do we get together, but the actual structure of the organization that they were dealing with. And some people get shocked when they hear this, and others go puzzled, and others get turned off, and others are interested. But the fact is that at least in the United States, and I think it's basically the same thing in Europe, a business structure, particularly a corporation, is a device for slavery. A corporation is a legal person that is owned. A person that is owned is a slave. So literally, I think it was in 1888 that the Supreme Court in the US said that it's okay to have a legal slave. And so the basic structure problem we're dealing with is how do you have people together and not have a legal slave controlling them? And
Can I
so,
just jump
yeah,
in with that briefly, John? So I want to do a little bit of translation for people who are watching this who haven't thought about this.
okay.
Because, if you're watching this and you're thinking, okay, but we all know that corporations aren't really people. Like, there might be people who are watching this who are thinking, yeah, but that shouldn't be the reality. Like, we shouldn't be equating legal entities that are these legal abstractions to living, breathing humans. But the thing that I want to, the twist that I want to offer is that there's, yes, this legal abstraction, but there's also a working community, which is a human working community. And we might say that a legal abstraction has no embodied reality equivalent, it's like, and therefore we shouldn't care who owns a legal abstraction. But I suggest that to our viewers that we should care who owns human communities, like who gets to decide what a human community will do. So back to you, John.
Okay, and just so very quickly, there actually is a way to structure an organization so that it's not a slave structure, that everybody has a voice in the ownership of that legal person. So that frees them, that frees the legal person. And so if you have that, then you can still have a command structure, but you also have a structure where everybody's voice counts in steering the way that's commanded. Just like when you're driving a car, you've got to pay attention to what your eyes are bringing in, and maybe some of the passengers in the car if if they've got the map, and so on. So bringing everybody into the measurement process that's in steering, and guides leading is the way to do that freeing. And so getting that across to the people that wrote it and saying, we can help you do that. I don't know if they got it because they didn't take our offer. It was not the formula that they wanted. So that's there. You can actually, just like free people do a lot more better things than a slave structure. It's the same thing with organizations. If you can operate in a way that that legal structure is actually a free legal person, then you do much better.
So I think we can probably all agree that free humans and maybe free human working communities are going to be more effective than enslaved ones. But how does this translate into addressing staffing expenses? Can you jump in with
Right.
an
Yeah.
intervention that gets to reduce staffing expenses?
Yeah, sure. The staff has a say in how do we reduce our labor costs. And maybe who knows what innovative things will come up. Maybe, hey, we just need some people sometimes in here and we can make this kind of arrangement or whatever, so that you make the decision about staffing reductions together with the staff is a much more effective and exciting and rewarding way of doing it. A little bit like a money pile. You can figure out who gets paid what money, thinking collectively together. I know organizations that do that now, rather than the management saying, you get this much money this year. It's like everybody, we got to figure out how do we divide up the riches that we've developed all together.
Mhm.
And that's much more motivating.
And Carolina, do you have any other sort of priming questions for John before I take a turn with my answer for this?
Nope, no questions.
Cool. Well,
I do have a quick question for you, Carolina. I, I, I would love to hear how the dance that might help people think together.
I didn't get the second word. What did I know?
How you know about dancing and a collective intelligence that develops as people
Mm.
dance together. What?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's interesting because to be honest, like I hold space for music making. That's the primary thing in a community setting, and I use a lot of circle processes. And a lot of that has, come to me through the Sociocratic tradition, basically, but other circle processes as well, like, and ultimately it's about just, I guess allowing each person to feel like they are part of the whole, making them feel like they have an equal say by literally allowing them time to be heard and making sure that, when we do, for instance, choose something we want to sing about, it reflects a deep listening of what was said, but also like the best thinking. So yeah, I guess each person, the way it works is each person in the circle can say, you know, what their intention is for making music that evening, and then I reflect back to people based on what was said, what would be like the best thing for us to be making music on. And yeah, I guess that does allow the best of people's intelligence to come forwards. And quite often, whatever we choose as the topic for our music making, it's first of all understood by everybody in the making of the music. So, you know, they're because they've had that moment of actually listening to each other, but also quite often like one topic can hit the needs of multiple people.
Mm.
Anyways, that's I guess one example from music making. But I
Nice.
suppose what I was going to add is that, yeah, in a similar way, you know, I don't know that much about lean and agile, but I understand that they kind of have a commitment to learning through like these kind of collective intelligence processes as well. And yeah, I guess I have a lot of faith in them to help steer us, because even like with our music making, what happens at the end of a session is I'll ask people for feedback as well. And each time I receive that feedback, I learn so much more about how I can improve going forwards. And you know, doing this in an iterative way just allows us to learn together. And I feel like my music practice has expanded so much because of using these kinds of tools. Yeah. So I suppose to bring it back to the example of this client, I guess, yeah, absolutely listening to what the staff has to say about the best way to cut costs and making experiments where you try and see whether these you know these cost cutting measures will actually work, and commit to continuously learning about that. You know, these are things which are like very much embedded in the sociocracy tradition, but I suppose also in lean and agile. And just a final thing to say that I really like that I've learned from sociocracy as well is that, you know, there's now this way of assigning salaries. I think this is what you were saying, John, that it's very much a conversation about needs. And, you know, people will come to the table talking about what their actual need is. And there'll be a collective conversation about how much money gets distributed to each person based on those needs, which I find really amazing. And I've actually used in my work, and it's quite transformative. Like it changes the whole conversation. It's a different paradigm, I think. Yeah.
Just to interrupt, Nate, I really want to bring singing to a hackathon sometime.
Oh, that
Never
sounds,
put
that
music in a
sounds,
hackathon.
well, let's get Carolina to run that for us.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
The so I've had experience using consent, co-design by consent to create both hiring and firing processes, and to decide how much people get paid. So I know that that can work, but when there's this pressure for cuts, firing people is often the wrong move. And if there's especially strong pressure to find savings, there's a desire to use lean or agile or sociocracy or some blend of these things. Quite a few people who are experts in the field, many of whom have written books where they put this down in print, will tell you, make an agreement that you're not going to fire anybody while you are learning to do the things that will make you better at making decisions together, and that any redesign will happen by consent so that people have a chance to object, and so that people have this social safety that allows them to really be creative together, rather than feeling that they need to defend their territory or start fighting the bosses. Because if you want to waste money, creating a fight is the best way to do it. So the firing approach often loses you money and stops you from being able to shift into the kind of productivity increases and resulting savings that lean and agile and sociocracy can get you. So, if I were going to, tell this potential client right now, well, this is how we want to go about it. I would say, look, first of all, promise people that there's a period of time when you're not going to fire anybody, and that any reductions in staff costs are going to come out of decisions or designs that happen in the collaborative conversation that people on the team have together. So there are other things you can do. If it's absolutely critical, you could, check and see if all management is willing to take a pay reduction or pay holiday for a short period of time, for example, like just to give you the cash flow protection that you need in order to do this learning process. And I guarantee you that if your management team is willing to do that, that everybody will see that you seriously believe that this is urgent, and B, feel that you're on the same side and get your intention to work with them to find solutions. But the last thing that I want to say about this is, Carolina, you've talked about this community building program that you've learned. It was developed by Bobby McFerrin, the Don't Worry, Be Happy guy. But he's got this whole program in Brazil, where you're originally from, that you've trained in and used. And the thing that we're talking about here is community cohesion. John started talking about the importance of, freeing or not enslaving this human working community. And the other side of, and then we've been talking about the importance of learning and collective intelligence in that community. But there's this thing of, okay, social safety, we're not going to kick you out right now. And if somebody has to leave, we're going to decide that together. But I just want to wrap up by hearing a little bit more about what it might be like if we had Bobby McFerrin helping us create community cohesion in the workplace. What might that look like if we brought a little bit of this sort of Brazilian genius into our UK or North American ways?
Well, just to, I guess, just expand a little bit on that. So I haven't formally trained, but I have worked a lot with the Música do Círculo movement in Brazil, which literally translates to music of the circle. And it's basically about voice and body musical improvisation. And there's a lot of, I mean, it's a transformative experience, it's definitely completely inclusive, and it uses people's intuitive musicality that all of us are born with. If you can talk, you can sing; if you can walk, you can dance; if you can count, you can keep rhythm. And it uses very simple building blocks and giving people different parts to play so that they're immediately in the act of music making. And I mean, what would it mean to create cohesion? I mean, music, because it's intuitive in each one of us, and it's a language that is universal. You don't even have to speak the same language. You can make music together. And it's all about creating conditions in which people feel welcome, and understanding that, everything you're saying is an invitation. People can choose to accept it or not, and make any adjustments they need to feel comfortable. And the way I hold my circles as well is I'm very much in a place of like showing people how they can be musical, but not telling them what they should do with that. So allowing them the freedom to decide. And yeah, I guess in some, people are immediately put into a place of play and a place of embodiment and having fun, and that's, you know, their inner childs immediately shine through, and there's no better way to like meet and connect with people than the act of like, I think, the act of making music together. So
Nice.
yeah, it's very bonding, joyful experience.
Nice.
Awesome. So it sounds to me like if we were going to sort of take this all the way, we would have a hackathon that starts with this Musica do Circulo and then explores questions that we genuinely find challenging, like how could we reduce our staffing expenses without firing a bunch of people? And then comes out with a few different creative proposals that might be adopted by consent as experiments that the working community could conduct, you know, try it out for a certain period of time.
Sounds like fun. Yeah.
More fun than a firing project, that's for sure.
Just a wrap-up thought. Everybody on this or is listening to this broadcast owns themselves. You own yourself and you're free. So the idea is to create an organization that owns itself, which means that outside investors are in the process too. They're involved if you have to reduce staff in the whole thought process, but they're there with consent. So everybody owns their collective self.
Cool. Well, here I am at a climbing gym in Amsterdam. Where are you coming in from right now, John?
Near Washington, D.C. in the good old USA.
That's your home library?
Yeah.
Office?
Yes, indeed. Yeah. I've been meaning to scan those and get rid of them and do something else, but I haven't done it yet.
And where are you at, Carolina?
I'm in Hastings in the UK. Yeah.
Well, to all you folks out there, wherever you are, thank you for joining us. This has been a fun conversation for me.
Thanks to both of you. I enjoyed it.
Thank